An amazing technical wrestler who suffered a tragic and early death while the rest of his family had left the company he worked for in disgrace. Owen Hart's story and talent is something many didn't get to see, whether it was a series of fantastic matches or genuinely comedic moments. Owen Hart was able to pull it all off. During this Career in Minutes, we will recap the entire career of Owen Hart from his generational beginnings to his tragic passing. Owen Hart was born May 1965 in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, to the illustrious and famous Hart family. His most famous relative to the casual viewer would be his brother, Bret the Hitman Hart. He met his high school sweetheart, Martha, who revealed that during his younger years, he was trying to make a living outside of pro wrestling, but eventually conceded and began training at his father's famous Hart Dungeon. He would start wrestling in his father's promotion, Stampede Wrestling, while he continued to sharpen his skills. In 1986, he would achieve his first championship, winning the Stampede Wrestling International Tag Team Championships with Vince Basarab, then his brother-in-law. He was quickly noticed in the pro wrestling world, winning Pro Wrestling Illustrated's 1987 Rookie of the Year award. He would also begin doing tours in New Japan Pro Wrestling that same year, where he would have matches against legendary Japanese wrestlers Jushin Thunder Liger and Hiroshi Hase, the latter which he beat for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship, becoming the first non-Japanese wrestler to hold that honor. Owen's success was not unnoticed by the WWE, then known as the WWF, who had a working relationship with his father's federation. He signed with them in 1988, and though his brother Bret Hart was also there, the WWF chose to give him the gimmick of a superhero, where he would utilize his fast-paced and high-flying style. He was called the Blue Blazer, and had his first big pay-per-view match at Survivor Series 1988, where he teamed with the Ultimate Warrior, Brutus Beefcake, Jim Brunzell, and Sam Houston to beat the Honky Tonk Man, Greg Valentine, Ron Bass, Bad News Brown, and Dangerous Danny Davis. He would sit around the mid-card for the remainder of his first run in the WWF, never quite elevated to stardom or defeating main event talent. He would lose to Mr. Perfect at Wrestlemania 5 and leave shortly after. He went on to wrestle as both Owen Hart and the Blue Blazer in Stampede Wrestling and his tours in Japan, Mexico, and Germany. Stampede Wrestling would close down shortly after, and he would bid farewell to his Blue Blazer gimmick as he would put his mask on the line against El Canek and lose. He briefly wrestled in the WCW for a series of matches, but this was before WCW would become a titan to the rival WWF. Speaking of the WWF, he would find his way back there as he never quite struck a deal with WCW due to their desire to have him move out to Atlanta. His brother and brother-in-law Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart had just split up their very popular tag team, the Hart Foundation. Bret's career was blossoming, but Jim Neidhart was struggling to find success. Owen Hart would enter in as his new tag team partner, and they would form the New Foundation. The team was popular, but would only see one pay-per-view match at the Royal Rumble 1992, where they defeated the Orient Express. Jim Neidhart would leave the company shortly after, and this left Owen Hart to find a path toward a singles career. This path would not last long, but would include a victory over Skinner at Wrestlemania 8. Owen would briefly team with Koko B. Ware to form the tag team High Energy. The team would pick up one meaningful match, a loss to the Head Shrinkers at Survivor Series 1992. The team would quietly fade away as Owen would begin another chance at a singles career, which was briefly offset early on by a knee injury. His brother Bret was in the midst of a feud with Jerry Lawler. This feud extended past promotions as the United States Wrestling Association, or USWA, had a working relationship with the WWF and would share talent. Owen Hart would support his brother through this feud and even win the USWA Unified World Heavyweight Championship in 1993 from Papa Shango. However, another knee injury would sideline him until the fall of 1993. He would return by his brother Bret's side, along with their other brothers Bruce and Keith, to team up at Survivor Series 1993. During the match, Owen and Bret would accidentally bump into one another, and this mishap caused Owen to be eliminated. A heated argument erupted between Owen and Bret, causing a severance in the Hart family. Owen would complain about living in his brother's shadow, but Bret would refuse to face his brother and try to mend their relationship. It seemed to work as the two would begin to team up frequently once again, and the two managed to get a match for the WWF Tag Team Championships at the 1994 Royal Rumble. They would face the Quebecers, but Bret would suffer a kayfabe injury to his knee, and this caused him to struggle in the tag match and be able to tag in his brother. Owen would become incredibly frustrated, not being able to get into the ring. Eventually, the referee would call the match due to Bret Hart's injury, and this caused Owen Hart to snap. He attacked his brother and kicked his injured knee. He claimed his brother was selfish and holding him down. The two would square off at Wrestlemania 10. The match that would ensue would go down to be considered one of the greatest wrestling matches of all time and certainly one of the best opening matches on any pay-per-view in history. Owen Hart would pick up a clean victory over his brother, but his brother, having won the Royal Rumble previously that year, would get the last laugh and win the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at the end of the night. Owen Hart would now find great success as a heel, winning the 1994 King of the Ring tournament. He would take on the moniker, the King of Hearts. The feud between Bret and Owen would continue and give us another classic match at SummerSlam 1994 where Bret Hart successfully defended his world championship against his brother in a steel cage match. There was another match, a lumberjack match, where Owen Hart initially won and was actually announced as the new WWF World Heavyweight Champion before the match was ordered to restart due to cheating on Owen's part, with Bret Hart then securing the official win after. Later on, with Owen Hart out of the title picture, he had not forgotten his hatred for his brother. At Survivor Series 1994, Bret Hart was set to face off against Bob Backlund to defend his world championship. During the match, Bob Backlund would lock Bret Hart in his signature submission, the crossface chicken wing, for nearly 10 minutes. All the while, Owen was begging for his parents to throw in the towel on Bret's behalf, acting as if he was worried for his brother. Eventually, his mom, Helen, threw in the towel, costing Bret Hart his championship. After the fact, Owen revealed his true intentions and raised the towel in celebration as he left the arena. Fed up with Owen constantly costing him more opportunities to win his title, Bret would soundly defeat Owen and put an end to this portion of their feud. Owen would go on to defeat the Smoking Guns with his new partner, Yokozuna, and win the WWF Tag Team Championships at WrestleMania 11, which they held for 5 months before losing them to Shawn Michaels and Diesel at In Your House 3. They would continue to team on and off for the remainder of the year, even regaining the tag titles for a brief period. Jim Cornette, who helped manage this team, would eventually begin to form Camp Cornette, an ensemble of heel characters. This would include the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, Owen's brother-in-law who supported Bret through the brothers' feud. With the Bulldog now being a heel and his close connection to Owen, the two would begin to frequently team up. The two would win the tag team championships at In Your House 10, where they defeated the Smoking Guns. Tension would soon arise, though, as a number of miscommunications was getting between the two wrestlers, such as Hart accidentally eliminating his partner from the 1997 Royal Rumble. Still tag team champions, the two would end in the finals of a tournament to crown the first ever WWF European champion. The Bulldog would win this match by defeating Owen. The two would eventually clash in a match as Owen Hart demanded a shot at Bulldog's European championship. A vicious match would ensue between the tag team champions until Bret Hart, who had just turned heel, entered the fray and stopped the match to appeal to both men about just how important their family is. This conversation would lead to Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Davey Boy Smith, Jim Neidhart, and family friend Brian Pillman forming a heel, anti-American version of the formerly popular Hart Foundation. Shortly after, Owen would defeat Rocky Maivia to win his first WWF Intercontinental Championship. The Hart Foundation now had every championship except for the World Championship for a brief period. However, Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels would go on to take the tag team championships from the two champions later that year. This would set up a feud between Owen and Stone Cold. Stone Cold would get an initial one-up after retaining his tag titles in a rematch. 1997 SummerSlam was fast approaching and Owen put his Intercontinental Championship up against Stone Cold. This was the match where Owen Hart delivered a botched pile driver that legitimately broke Steve Austin's neck. Stone Cold would go on to win the match, but would have to vacate the title immediately after as he would be out with this injury for a considerable time. During this time, Owen would begin to mock Steve Austin's signature Austin 316 I just whooped your ass slogan with Owen 316 I just broke your neck. A tournament to crown a new Intercontinental Champion was enacted, and Owen Hart would make it to the finals where he would face Farouk at Bad Blood in Your House. Steve Austin was present to present the winner with his former championship. Austin would get involved though and cost Farouk the match, claiming that he wanted Owen to have the title so he himself could defeat Owen when he was healthy again. This would prove true as Steve Austin won the championship from Owen at 1997 Survivor Series. This night would prove to be a terrible one for the Hart family as its main event featured the infamous Montreal Screwjob, where Vince McMahon would change the planned finish of a match without Bret Hart's knowledge. The then world champion Bret Hart was set to leave for the competitor WCW and refused to lose to his real-life rival Shawn Michaels in their match in Bret's hometown. He made an agreement with Vince McMahon to win the match and then forfeit his title the next night. Vince McMahon would not follow through with this agreement and rung the bell in the middle of the match while Hart was locked in submission, and the accomplices of the screwjob took off. This would cause a major rift between the WWF and the Hart family, with Jim Neidhart and the British Bulldog leaving soon after and joining Bret Hart in WCW. Owen Hart would then become the only remaining Hart in the WWF. He would not make another appearance until In Your House Degeneration X, where he would attack Shawn Michaels. Owen would quickly become a fan favorite with his newer, edgy attitude going by the nickname the Lone Hart. He would begin a feud with DX, mainly against Michaels and Triple H. He would actually get a World Championship match against Shawn Michaels, but would be cheated by Triple H when he was about to win. He and Triple H would toss the European Championship back and forth for a moment before Triple H finally ended the rivalry by beating Owen Hart. Owen Hart would then team up with Ken Shamrock to take on Rocky Maivia and Mark Henry. Owen would turn on Shamrock and join Henry and Maivia in their faction, the Nation of Domination. This faction was a pro-black heel stable loosely based on the Black Panther Party and the Nation of Islam. It is credited with launching the career of The Rock as we know him today. The faction would go on to feud with DX, but Owen Hart would quickly be sidetracked by the return of Ken Shamrock, who was seeking out Owen Hart for revenge. The two would split wins on a pair of matches with no definitive winner in the feud. As the Nation of Domination began to slowly fade away, Owen would begin teaming with Jeff Jarrett toward the end of 1998. It was soon thereafter where Owen Hart would injure Dan Severn in kayfabe and would begin a storyline to blur the lines of story and reality where Owen Hart would quit the WWF. Not long after quitting, the Blue Blazer would appear on WWF TV for the first time in several years. Although this was obviously Owen Hart, he would deny that claim and would now portray a self-righteous, holier-than-thou heel character. His teaming with Jeff Jarrett would continue as the two would turn it into a comical storyline, trying to prove that the Blue Blazer was in fact not Owen Hart, which included Jeff Jarrett dressing up as the Blazer while Hart stood beside him, and both men being present while the Blazer was in the ring. However, this Blazer was very clearly a black man. The team would go on to defeat Ken Shamrock and the Big Boss Man for the tag team titles, successfully defending them at Wrestlemania 15 against D'Lo Brown and Test. They would eventually lose them to the team of Kane and X-Pac. The two would continue to team until the tragic events of Over the Edge 1999. During this pay-per-view, Owen Hart, as the Blue Blazer, was meant to enter in on a harness from the rafters. He was going to be lowered to the ring before taking a short fall and face planting for comedic effect. This stunt required the harness and grapple to have a quick release on it. This meant that the harness had no backup safety measures. During his entrance, while still nearly 80 feet above the ring, the quick release would accidentally trigger, and Owen Hart would plummet into the ropes and bounce into the ring where he would die soon after from internal bleeding at the age of 34. The feed of the pay-per-view was cut away from the broadcast, so no one watching on the television saw the event. The WWF would continue on with the event, which caused some outrage. The Hart family would sue WWF for the dangerous stunt and win a settlement of $18 million after nearly 2 years in court. His wife, Martha, would use much of that money to set up the Owen Hart Foundation, a charity organization to honor the late legendary wrestler. The next night on Raw, the WWF hosted a tribute show titled Raw is Owen. And 6 months later, while still in WCW, his brother Bret Hart would wrestle a match against Chris Benoit in the same arena Owen had passed away in a tribute match. Owen Hart's untimely and avoidable death is a major tragedy that supersedes his career. However, it must not be forgotten that Owen Hart was truly a phenomenal wrestler who is considered one of the best technicians and one of the innovators of today's wrestling style. Sometimes overshadowed by his death, or even his brother, Owen Hart is best remembered as one of the greatest wrestlers of all time who we lost years worth of amazing matches due to a reckless and unsafe stunt. Rest in peace, Owen Hart.